Hey folks, Andrew J. Polk, host of Talk El Paso on News Radio 690 KTSM. Recently, we had an interview series with both of the district attorney candidates for El Paso on the Democrat side of the ballot. Reminder, there is no Republican side of the ballot. No one ran in that case. So what that means is that the outcome of this partisan election will determine who becomes the next district attorney. They will be on the ballot in November, but again, there will be no one else challenging them. So we talked with both of the candidates, and here coming up we have the interview with Yvonne Rosales, the candidate for district attorney. Enjoy. Joining me now, we have James Montoya, candidate for the district attorney for El Paso. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. I appreciate it.
This is a race we weren't able to cover ahead of the runoff election just because it was a minorly crowded field. But now that we're in this runoff election, we want to talk about it. So for people who haven't been paying attention, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is James Montoya. I want to be your district attorney. Like Andrew said, unfortunately, I know this race doesn't get quite as much media coverage as some of the other, city council or congressional races. But for those of you that aren't familiar, the district attorney is the government lawyer who works with the police to investigate and solve all of the crime that happens here in El Paso. We're the ones that file the charges in court. We're the ones that we play an important role in providing oversight to the police, and we're the ones that fight for justice for the victims of crime. I'm one of the assistant district attorneys right now. I'm the only candidate running for DA that works in the DA's office right now as an assistant DA. And for the last several years, for the last 6 years, my specialty has been the murder cases. I've worked on over 100 different homicide investigations here in El Paso, including the Walmart shooting, including the murder of Sheriff's Deputy Peter Herrera happened down in San Rosario last year. So really proud of my record. Love being a prosecutor. I went to law school so that I could send dangerous people to the penitentiary. I never wanted to be a defense attorney, never wanted to get rich, suing people. I wanted to be the lawyer that helped, solve the crime, that fights for justice for the victims, and I wanted to do my part to keep El Paso safe, and that's why I'm running. I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep El Paso safe.
So if elected to office, and for people who are not familiar, this is essentially the election because as I'm aware, on the Democrat primary, because as far as I'm aware, there is no Republican counterpart, right?
That's correct. Whoever wins this Democratic runoff election will be the next district attorney.
And again, for people who are not aware, the district attorney covers more than just El Paso. It's a kind of a small region around here.
Right. So it's El Paso, Hudspeth, and Culberson County, which is all the way out to Van Horn. And so here in El Paso, the DA, we prosecute all misdemeanors and felonies, pretty much every crime involving an adult. We do not prosecute juvenile crime. That's the county attorney's office. And then in Hudspeth and Culberson, we cover felony cases all the way out to Van Horn.
All right, so why are you running for office? What specific things, I guess, would you want to change in running for office?
Sure. So I think we do a lot of good things here in El Paso. Like I mentioned, Andrew, we're really blessed to be, for a city of our size, to have a fairly low violent crime rate. And the crime that we do have, our law enforcement agencies do a really exceptional job solving it. There are some years here in El Paso where the El Paso Police Department solves over 100% or 100% of the murder cases that happen here in El Paso. And that's really outstanding. I mean, compared to other cities, where they're solving 30, 40, 50% of their cases. And to me, that's not an accident. Okay. It's not just good luck. We're able to stay a safe city because it's a team effort. It's a team effort between the law enforcement agencies, the community, and the DA's office. Because, the police, if citizens report crime and the police investigate and solve the crime, it's up to the DA's office to make sure that case is handled correctly in court and that people are held accountable. And for me, that's why it's my number one goal. I want to make sure that we're staying safe by ensuring that cases are handled correctly in court. I think this is a community that, for the most part, by and large, trust their law enforcement. They're willing to report crime. They're willing to be witnesses. They're willing to come to court and testify. And like I said, you can't really say the same for a lot of other cities, unfortunately. And I want to make sure that we maintain that trust, that cooperation, that teamwork to keep El Paso safe. I think one of the biggest areas that we can improve on, and certainly one of the areas that I think our office has been critiqued on over the last several years is not being nearly as aggressive or transparent on how we handle cases involving public officials. I know we received some critique, or at least Mr. Esparza, received some critique on how we handled the corruption at the school districts. Some of the cases involving elected officials. And so for me, I think one of the areas that we can really improve on is handling those cases much more quickly, much more transparently, letting the public know, hey, this is why we decided to pursue this case. This is why we didn't decide to pursue this case. And so I really want to be a lot more open and accessible on how we handle those cases. I want to make a dedicated public integrity unit to review allegations of official misconduct by public officials, whether that's other elected officials or government employees, the school districts, police officers. So I think there's room for improvement in those kinds of cases.
If you're just joining us, my guest right now is James Montoya, candidate for the district attorney for El Paso. If you want to find out more information about him and his campaign, you can visit jamesmontoya.com or find him over on Facebook, James Montoya for district attorney. So you brought up a couple of interesting points there about prosecuting murder cases. Of course, we have the August 3rd shooting case coming up here. Even some more adjustments come to that recently with the latest indictment based on the last victim to pass. So that, I think, is one of the primary things in people's minds is how would you handle that case as district attorney?
Sure. So I'm the only one running for district attorney who's actually worked on the Walmart shooting. I've worked on, like I mentioned earlier, over 100 different homicide investigations here in El Paso. And, this is obviously the worst crime that has ever happened here. I mean, in the history of El Paso. And we're the charges have been filed. We're going to keep going through this trial process. One of the questions I get the most on the campaign trail is, why is it taking so long? And I can tell you, death penalty cases, they take a long time. Murder cases in general take some time to work their way through the court process. Death penalty cases even more so, because we just have to make sure that we're following all the rules, we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, because we certainly don't want this case coming back on appeal in 5, 10, 15 years. And so, we want to make sure that we're, like I said, we're following due process. And for me, as you and your listeners might be aware, the federal government has also filed charges. And so right now those prosecutions are happening side by side, parallel. My preference would be to try the defendant in state court. I want a jury of El Pasoans to decide his sentence. I think it happened here. I think the case should be tried here. And ultimately, I think he belongs on Texas death row. And that's why I think we should try it in state court. We're going to fight to get it to trial as quickly as we can. But, we're going to have to work with the judge. We're going to have to work with the defense attorneys to make sure that everybody's ready to go as quickly as possible.
Would you be leading the case or leading the prosecution of the trial yourself, or would you be having someone else within the office do it, again, if elected?
Sure. If I'm elected and the case is still pending, which it looks like it will, I intend to be trying that case.
Gotcha. Another thing that you brought up there was talking about holding public officials accountable and kind of just making sure that local institutions are held accountable, that there's going to be a kind of a level of trust in them. And you mentioned having that kind of public integrity task force. There, of course, has been a lot of discussion about that recently, particularly around things like qualified immunity, grand jury trials for police officers. Qualified immunity, not exactly in your wheelhouse, but for police misconduct. How would you handle that? We haven't necessarily had a lot of it, or at least not on the scale that is being talked about nationally here in El Paso, but should something like what we saw in Minnesota happen here, how would you handle a situation like that?
Sure. So I can tell you right now what happens here in El Paso is anytime that there's an officer-involved shooting, or anytime that someone dies in police custody or while they're being apprehended, there is a very thorough investigation. And every one of those cases, anytime someone dies in police custody or they're being apprehended, that case right now is going before a grand jury of El Pasoans for their review. That is a policy that I intend to continue. And you would be surprised, there are some places in this country and some places in the state of Texas where that does not happen, where the decision is made by the district attorney and the district attorney alone. I don't think that's right. I think that we should have a group of citizens review each of those cases. And it doesn't necessarily mean that charges are going to be filed or they're not going to be filed. There are cases where there is justifiable use of force, but we still want to be looking at those and again, like I said, handling those transparently and expeditiously as possible. I don't want El Paso to be in Minneapolis. I don't want El Paso to be in Atlanta. You know, it really saddens me that after what happened in Minneapolis, the city felt that their best way forward, that their only way forward, was to disband their police department. To me, that's shocking. I can't imagine people here feel that same way. If you ask me now, do I think there is systemic racism in the El Paso Police Department, in the El Paso Sheriff's Office? No, I don't believe that. Is there room for improvement? Certainly. You know, I will tell you, I think, anecdotally, if you look at the cases where El Paso police officers have used lethal force probably in the last decade, I think a major factor in a significant number of cases is going to be a mental health episode. And I think the El Paso Police Department has recognized that. I know they're in federal court right now involving some of those cases. And as a result, you know, the department implemented a crisis intervention team, which, you know, they send out an officer and a mental health clinician to mental health calls to try to de-escalate whatever the situation might be. I'm very supportive of that. I think they should expand that. But in terms of you know, I know your initial question was about officer misconduct. You know, if a police officer causes or contributes to someone's death in their custody or causes somebody serious bodily injury, you know, if their head, you know, they're paralyzed or they're very seriously injured, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to review that in my office, and we're going to have a grand jury review that to make sure that things were handled appropriately, that the use of force was appropriate, was reasonable under the law. And like I want to be as transparent as we can when we're handling these cases, because I think that'll help, you know, improve upon the trust that the community has in its criminal justice system. You know, there's the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, they have a really helpful website where they publish the findings from officer-involved shootings. I certainly think that's something that we should look at. You know, there's a memo that's prepared for every case explaining why, you know, why a decision was made the way that it was. And it provides documentary evidence, and I think that's something that I'd like to do here.
All right. My guest right now has been James Montoya, candidate for the district attorney for El Paso. You want to find out more information about him and his positions, including a very detailed policy position questionnaire from the ACLU, you can visit jamesmontoya.com, or again, find him over on Facebook, James Montoya for district attorney. So, James, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us about these very important issues here today.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. Early voting starts on Monday. Hope to count on your support.
Thanks again to James Montoya for taking the time to speak with us and talk about some of the very important issues at stake in this election. There's a whole lot more than even we were able to get to, but make sure you go out and vote. Don't forget, early voting is going from June 29th through July 10th, and then Election Day on July 14th. For information on this and every race on the ballot, no matter which side you're voting for, make sure to go to epcountyvotes.com where they have all that information. And be sure to tune in to Talk El Paso every Saturday morning live on News Radio 690 KTSM 9 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thanks for watching.